Doc's story earlier triggered a memory for me, and it seemed fitting. It seemed to fit the theme because I didn't really have anything to fit the Last Chance theme until that triggered a memory. Anyway, I come from a big family locally. I have a million aunts and uncles around, and they're all pretty wacky, pretty fun, pretty artsy, and I love them all. One of the kind of matriarchs of our family was my Nanny Billet, and she lived to be well into her 90s. I don't remember exactly, but anyway, yeah, I grew up kind of next to her at my grandfather's farm. I was there a lot of times, and my Nanny Billet had a trailer up on the hill, and she was kind of always there, but you kind of always took her for granted. We would see her around and wave and stuff, and anyway, it turns out the older I got to hear more stories about Nanny Billet, and to our family, she was a witch. She was considered a witch. She was into powwowing, so she had a lot of, interesting stories about that. Some good, some bad from some of the other family members. But anyway, I found out about that, so I started asking around aunts and uncles, and I'm like, what was with this powwowing thing, And, they would have various memories of it, like, oh, when I was a kid, I remember I had wart on my hand, and she rubbed a potato on it and buried it under a dripping faucet and whatever. And I'm like, all right, none of them remembered what exactly she did, but I'm like, in the end, did it fix your problem? Every single one of them, yeah, it fixed my problem. And then there were other various stories about, one family member married someone who was not good, and she kind of threatened him, and then he did something bad, and he ended up in the hospital, and she's like, that witch put a whammy on me, and all this stuff. And anyway, she was an interesting character I didn't know very well, and I just took for granted. But in my probably 30s, I guess, I imagine that's probably where it is time frame wise, I just woke up one morning, I'm like, man, I should go visit Nanny Billet. I haven't seen her in years. It had probably been 10 or 15 years since I really saw her. Family reunions, I'd see her in passing. But so I went back to visit her, and I sat in her living room for the whole evening and just told stories. She had crazy stories. I'm not much of a storyteller. I always get sidelined on stories, but like she told stories of my great-grandfather who died when I was 5. I didn't know. And he was like they drove like these little race cars, and they were driving him through a field, and he's following behind his friend, and there was a fence, like a little, horse fence, like a little wire fence, and his friend was driving in front of him, and his friend drove under this fence, and it decapitated him, and his head's bouncing along, and then that freaked him out. He didn't drive his race car after that, and she's telling me all these crazy stories. I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. And I got, like, for like 10 or 15 years, I hadn't seen her, and I go back, and I hear all these great stories, and it was such a great time. And I left there, and I'm like, well, that was really cool. And then, like, within a week or two after that, somebody's like, Nanny Billet died. I'm like, really? Like, that's so weird, because I hadn't talked to her in 10 or 15 years, and I just got this, like, undeniable feeling, like, I got to go visit her, like, right before she died. And maybe it's that whole crazy witchcraft thing, powwowing thing, I don't know what it was. But I got this idea, like, at her funeral, like, I'm like, I saw family from Virginia, from wherever, tons of family, and everyone there, I asked, when was the last time you saw Nanny Billet? Every single one of them was like, I haven't seen her for 5 years, but last week I went back and visited her. Every single one of them. And they were like, it had been years and multitudes of years since they had seen her, but every single one of them within the last month had been back to visit her. So it's so weird. She was in her trailer, and she woke up in the middle of the night, went out to her little dining room table, was looking out the window, just held her chest and died right then. But before she died, it was almost like she called up every single one of us and had us come visit her with. So every single one, we all had a story about, I hadn't seen her in years and years and years, but I went back and had this great time hanging out and hearing her stories, and then she died. So again, thank you, Doc, for your story reminding me of that great memory with my great-grandmother. So that's my last chance story. So.